Good morning, friends. It's Saturday, and I'm back with chapter 26 of my upcoming book, Campaign at Fort Stix. Now it's time to grab a snack, dim the lights, and let me take you into the mists of time with a story I call R&R. I was up early to get my chores done and be ready when Dad wanted to leave for South Bend and the auction. I was not really sure why I was going along since Mark was at Aunt Brenda's and I had pretty much not been in the house all week as I worked on my fort. Usually, I was taken because Mom needed a break. Not that it mattered. I was glad to get out. The ride to South Bend was uneventful, meaning I slept most of the way there. We arrived just before they opened the gates to the auction house, and Dad was told he had 1 hour to look over the vehicles for sale before the bidding started. There were a lot of nice vehicles there, mostly daily drivers, but here and there a few muscle cars and nice trucks could be found. We were headed towards a very nice 57 Chevy and almost to it when Dad steered us off to the side to look at a bunch of wrecked cars. There were cars wrecked from the front and back, and even some that looked like they were wrecked from all sides at once. "Why are we looking at the junkers?" I asked. "Because I need to find the rear clip for a car I have at the shop, and I'm hoping to find a couple more wrecked at opposite ends to build a complete car from," Dad said as he poked around in a wreck. He wrote down several numbers as we looked at cars, and then the loudspeaker announced it was time for the bidding. I listened closely as we stood and watched the auctioneer, but I could not make out a thing he said. It sounded like gibberish to me. I saw Dad raise his hands several times during the bidding, and twice the auctioneer slowed down enough for me to understand that 2 of the junkers were sold to him. When it was over, Dad had to sign some papers and give the man a check. When he was done, we headed for home. As we walked to the car, I saw a clock on the clock tower that said it was 11:30. Close enough to lunch for me. "Hey, Dad, we gonna get something to eat on the way home?" I asked. "I guess we could," he said. "What do you want?" "How about White Castle?" I suggested cheerily. He laughed. "Yeah, I guess I could do with about a dozen hamburgers." Yes! We were going to my favorite hamburger spot. I wasted no time getting in the truck, and less than 20 minutes later, the girl was handing my dad a bag full of burgers. As we pulled out, Dad ate his first burger in 2 bites and pulled across the street to a small store. I waited in the truck while he went in, happily munching burgers. He bought me 6 of them, and I was enjoying them. Dad came out with a 6-pack of beer and a large bottle of soda. He handed me the soda, which I happily accepted, and opened himself a beer. He turned the radio up and sat back to eat as he drove us back. It did not take long to finish the burgers, and when I was picking up the papers to put back in the bag, I also grabbed his 2 empty beer cans and stuffed them in. I hardly made a dent in my soda, and he'd already finished 2 drinks. Having slept all the way to the auction, I was now wide awake and looking at everything as we passed. Not long after we passed through La Porte, I noticed a big gravel pit next to the highway I had not seen before. The water was deep green, meaning it was probably very deep, and there was a couple people fishing there. "Hey, Dad, have you ever fished there?" I asked. "No, I never noticed it before. I think this area used to have a lot of trees, so we could not see it." "Well, that water is really green. I bet there are some big fish in there," I said, hoping he would commit. He slowed the truck and looked at it as we drove by. There were no fences around the property, and it was easily accessible from the feeder road. There were also no signs posted around it. "Looks like it might be worth a try," he said and sped up the truck. "Get some bait together later, and we'll see if we can get away after we slaughter the birds tomorrow." "Okay," I said, and then as an afterthought, it occurred to me that early morning might be best. "But shouldn't we fish early to get the best bite? We can always butcher chickens when we get back." "Yeah, the early bite is best," he agreed. I nodded and then was pretty much silent the rest of the way home. As far as I was concerned, we would be up at 0 dark 30 and be on the water by daylight. As we were driving through the endless cornfields outside of our home area, it suddenly occurred to me that I needed to pee. Not just pee, but in a really bad way. I had been holding it ever since finishing my soda not long after we passed the lake, and now it was becoming painful. "Dad, I really need to pee," I said. "We'll be home in 10 minutes, he said. I looked at the clock on the dash and where we were. We had not even got into Portage from Chesterton yet, and there were still a lot of stoplights on the way. I sat back and closed my eyes, trying to think of something else. Then the truck hit a bump, and I thought I would burst. When we finally pulled up at the house, what seemed like hours later, I jumped out of the truck and ran into the house. I was really wishing the outhouse was still there, and wished for it even more when I found the bathroom door locked and Mom was in there. I ran back outside to the back porch and peed off of the porch. As I relieved myself, I wondered if there was a world record for longest stream of pee, because I was shooting halfway across the backyard. It felt so good to be free of that pressure. When I finished, I went back into the house where I found Dad sitting at the kitchen table. "I have an idea," he said. "If we butcher part of the chickens this afternoon, we could go fishing in the morning and finish the rest when we get back." "Let me go get worms first," I said. "Yeah, you go get worms and then come out to the garage when you're done." Dad finished his beer and grabbed a fresh one to take to the garage with him. Grabbing my coffee can, I headed for the mulch pile. It only took a little while to get plenty of bait, and I put them in the refrigerator before going to the garage. Dad had a pot of water on a burner in the middle of the garage floor. The water was starting to boil, and he was sharpening a very large meat cleaver. When he was done, he told me to get one of the big white chickens and bring it into the garage. I will not describe the rest of the afternoon in detail, but we killed and cleaned 6 of the birds before dinner. I found out it was much easier to pluck the birds if they were dipped in the boiling water after they were killed. When we finished, Dad had me take the 5-gallon bucket containing feathers, heads, and feet out to the hole I dug in the field. I emptied the bucket there and buried the waste, making sure to not fill the hole so the remainder could be added the next day. When I got back into the house, Mom was wrapping the chickens in butcher paper and Dad was putting them in the freezer after writing the date on them. When they saw me, Dad handed me a small knife and told me to clean the gizzards in the sink. He split one open and showed me how to clean it before leaving me to do the rest. When I was done, Mom added the gizzards to a plastic bowl containing the livers and hearts, which she also put in the freezer. By the time we were finished, the sun was beginning to set. I ate my dinner quietly and headed off to my room on the porch. As I passed by the room I shared with my brother, I saw Mark was there asleep on his bed. I wondered how long he'd been sleeping because I had not seen him all this afternoon. He would be surprised to find we were going fishing in the morning. I was up early with the sun Saturday morning and found Dad already sitting at the kitchen table. He told me to wake Mark up so we could have breakfast before we left, so I wandered back to the bedroom and got him up. We ate cereal and then loaded the stuff in the truck to go. The sun was just coming over the horizon when we parked on the bank of the new lake. It was actually an old gravel pit, but you could tell by the tree growth it had been filled for many years. Dad found a good spot on the point between 2 sections of the lake, and we cast lines. Dad had one rod out with a night crawler and was working a lure on his other rod. By mid-morning, we only caught a few small panfish, and Dad said he wished he had some minnows because he'd seen crappie and bass chasing his lure but unwilling to take it. I looked over at the tall weeds and small trees leading to the lake from the woods a little way away. It looked like there was a stream there. "Hey, Dad, would chubs make good bait?" I asked. "Yeah, they would be great, but where are you going to get chubs?" I pointed at the stream and grabbed my rod to reel it up. "I bet there's some chubs in that stream." Putting a couple worms in my shirt pocket, I walked over to the stream. Behind the rim of bushes, the bank and stream opened up nicely, so I pushed through to stand in the clear. I put a thin red worm on my hook and cast it into a deep-looking pool by some rocks. Within a minute, I had a nice 4-inch chub. I ran back to Dad. "How's this?" I asked. "Yeah, that's good," he said, taking the chub. "Can you get some more?" "Yeah, but I need something to carry them in." He dumped the worms into a paper sack he had carried his beer in and handed me the coffee can. I ran back into the weeds and continued to fish for chubs. I managed to catch another dozen between 4 and 7 inches in a short while and went back to where we were fishing. Dad put the biggest one on his rod and one of the smaller ones on Mark's rod. I grabbed one about 5 inches long and put it on my rod. I guess my reel was a little tangled because when I tried to cast, it stopped short. I pulled the line out by hand until it was free and was going to reel up when I saw it was still sinking. Apparently, we were close to a deep ledge because my bait was going way down. I fed line until it stopped and then closed the bail and set the rod on the forked stick Dad made for me. Dad caught the first fish within just a few minutes of casting. It was a nice yellow perch of about 2 pounds. It had swallowed the chub whole and the hook was caught deep inside. As Dad cut his line and prepared to tie on another hook, my rod suddenly bent over hard. I grabbed it and fought in another perch about the same size. This one was hooked in the lip and I removed the hook easily. I still had a live chub. I cast it back out and was setting my rod down when Mark began to scream. "Dad, help!" Mark screamed. "The fish is pulling me into the water!" I looked over and Mark's rod was bent over in half and like he said, the fish was pulling him into the lake. His feet were sliding in the mud as he tried to hold on. I ran over and grabbed him to pull back when Dad took over and told me to get the net. I ran over and grabbed the net. I had laughed that morning when Dad said grab the big net because it was usually only used when we were fishing for Chinook salmon in the fall. Salmon get up to 50 pounds and a very large net is needed for them. Dad told me to get in the water and hold the net ready. As I walked out about knee deep, I noticed the ledge I was aware of was actually just a few feet from the shore. Looking over the edge, all I could see was black. The water was very deep, just a couple feet from me, and though I could swim well, it scared me. After what seemed like forever, Dad spoke up again. "Okay, Kevin, the fish is coming up now," he said. "Keep the net in the water and let it swim in and then drag it back onto the bank." I watched Mark's line as it cut across the water like a hot knife through butter. I could actually hear it making a zing sound since it was so tight. Then the line started heading towards me and I saw Dad pull Mark back to steer the fish to the net. That is when everything got crazy. I was holding the net, looking at the line, when this giant green and gold sea monster came racing out of the black toward me. It shoved its head in the net and then stopped going in just after the rim passed its gills. Not because the fish stopped, though. Rather, it was because the fish was already in the net as far as it could go. It was a monster, and it scared the heck out of me. I tried to pick up the net and the fish, and I stumbled back toward the shore, but the fish was not having it. It splashed its tail as it tried to swim forward, pushing me and the net backwards. I thought it was trying to eat me, and I moved even faster onto the shore. Then the fish shook its head and tore the net out of my hands. "Get the net!" my dad yelled. I reached for the net, but the fish was taking it and moving backwards toward the black water beyond the ledge. I could not reach the net without slipping into the abyss, and I stood there looking at it as my dad ran past and grabbed the net handle with his longer reach. Then the fish lunged toward me again, turned, and raced down into the black. Mark screamed as it pulled him into the water, and then the line snapped so loud it sounded like someone cracked a whip. "You let it get away!" Mark screamed at me. "Why didn't you grab the net, Kevin?" Dad yelled. "I could not reach without falling off the ledge," I said, and pointed to where the fish went. Dad looked at where I was pointing with sudden understanding. He walked out in the water and looked down for a long moment. Then he turned and walked back to get a beer. "Dad, Kevin let my fish get away," Mark whined. "There was nothing else he could do, Mark," Dad said. "The fish got out past where he could stand up." Mark threw his fishing pole down and sat in the dirt. He was mad that the fish got away and clearly believed I had lost it for him. I felt lucky to be alive. "What was that, Dad?" I asked. "Its head barely fit in the net, and it had long, sharp teeth, lots of them, and its head was almost as big as a bucket." "It was a muskie," Dad said. "A tiger muskellunge, and as big as it was probably a state record." I felt bad for Mark, but wished he could have seen the fish. He was way too far away and could not have seen the teeth or the size of it. It was a monster from the dark deep, and I was sure it wanted to eat me. We did not catch any more fish, and it was starting to get hot toward lunchtime. Dad tossed the perch back in the lake, and we headed for home. I still felt bad that Mark had lost the biggest fish I'd ever seen, but there was nothing I could do. When we got home, Mark ran to his room, and I did not see him the rest of the day. Dad regaled Mom with the story of the one that got away over a quick lunch of bologna sandwiches and fruit punch. Mark would not come out to eat, so Mom took his lunch in and sat with him while Dad and I went out to finish butchering the chickens. As I listened to him tell Mom about the fish, he did not blame me, but I could tell he blamed me. I knew I did what I could, but I still felt bad about it. I tried to forget as I concentrated on cleaning chickens. We finished with the chickens in the late afternoon, and after taking the birds and parts we wanted to keep inside to Mom, I went to my fort. Mom said she was going to roast one of the chickens for dinner with stuffing. Sitting on the porch of my fort with my legs hanging off, I thought I saw Mark looking out the window at me several times. But he did not wave or even give an indication he actually saw me. In a way, I was glad. I wanted to show him the fort, but I did not want to hear him whine about losing the fish. I mean, that's why they call it fishing and not catching. 'Cause sometimes you do not catch them. Besides, I had more important things to consider now. I found a branch from an oak tree about the size of my wrist and a little over a foot long when I was walking to the fort. Upon seeing it, I realized it was the perfect size to practice my whittling. I always saw Grandpa whittling with his pocket knife, and it never failed to keep me amused as he told me stories. Since he gave me a pocket knife for my birthday, I figured this was probably a skill I needed to practice. That way, I would be proficient when I was grown up and had to entertain others with whittling and stories. As I watched the shadows from the trees around me start to crawl toward the house, I realized I was getting pretty good at whittling. Maybe I would even whittle some custom balusters for the rails I needed to put on the front porch. Looking at my latest creation, I was feeling pretty confident. It had only taken the latter part of the afternoon to turn that oak branch into a perfectly serviceable toothpick. I hope you enjoyed this look into the campaign at Fort Stix. That's all for now, but I'll be back again next week with another story, just for you. Until then, sleep well.